Moors.
Islam.
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 I want to welcome you to, let me stop this for just a minute. I want to welcome you to the House of Reawakening Minds. We're having an issue with this. This is my new phone, so it wants to act up. Hold on just a minute. This is a new
Islam.
No, that's me saying that.
Ah.
We're gonna delete that.
Talking back to you.
No, we're gonna see if I can get this on there, because we have a new, I'm trying to think if I have this phone. Maybe I can attach this phone to the phone thing, how about that?
How about that?
That would be good, you go ahead and talk to him till I get this figured out.
Islam Moors.
Islam.
This is chapter 8. Council of the Seven of the World, taken from the Book of East of the Solid Brotherhood. And this is one of the most important chapters of Gnostic wisdom that's supposed to be presented to the masses, but usually is not. And so every once in a while, I'll share this because it will give you a concept of the politics behind the politics of the world. Council of the Seven of the World.
Islam Wars.
Islam.
I want to welcome you to the House of Reawakening Minds. Tonight, our teacher is the illustrious Grand Sheikh Taj Tarik Bey. Let's receive him.
I want to share with you one of the vital chapters from the Book of the East, which should be shared with most people, no matter what walk of life they are from, to give a better comprehension of the master sages behind your fundamental principles of religion, distinguished from dogma. Most people in what is known as the priesthood have this knowledge, but they usually don't expose this particular chapter because it kind of deals with them a little bit. But if we're going to solve some of the problems that we're faced with on the Earth planet, we're going to have to start dealing with certain realities and truths. And this is one of them. Chapter 8, the Council of the Seven of the World. In every age, since time began, but 7 sages lived. At first of every age, these sages meet to note the course of nations, people, tribes, and tongues, to note how far toward justice and love the race has gone, to formulate the code of law, religious postulates, and plans of rule best suited for the coming age. An age had passed, and lo, another age had come. The sages must convene. Now Alexandria was the center of the world's best thought, and here in Philo's home the sages met. From China came Mengstet. From India, Vidyapati came. From Persia, Caspar came. And from Assyria, Ashbina came. From Greece, Apollo came. Methano was the Egyptian sage, and Philo was the chief of Hebrew thought. The time was due. The council met and sat in silence 7 days. And then Mentz arose and said, the wheel of time has turned once more. The race is on a higher plane of thought. The garments that our fathers wore have given out. The cherubim have woven a celestial cloth, have placed it in our hands, and we must make for men new garbs. The sons of men are looking up for greater light. No longer do they care for gods hewn out of wood. They seek for Allah not made with hands. They see the beams of coming days, and yet comprehend them not. The time is ripe, and we must fashion well these garments for the race, and let us make for men new garbs of justice, mercy, and love. That they may hide their nakedness when shines the light of coming days. And Vidyapati said, our priests have all gone mad. They saw a demon in the wilds, and at him cast their lamps. And they are broken up, and not a gleam of light has any priest for men. The night is dark. The heart of India calls for light. The priesthood cannot be reformed. It is already dead. Its greatest needs are graves and funeral chants. The New Age calls for liberty, the kind that makes each man a priest, enables him to go alone and lay his offerings on the shrine of Allah. And Casper said, in Persia, people walk in fear. They do the good for fear to do the wrong. The devil is the greatest power in our land, and though a myth, he dandles on his knees both youth and age. Our land is dark, and evil prospers in the dark. Fear rides on every passing breeze and lurks in every form of life. The fear of evil is a myth, is an illusion and snare. But it will live until some mighty power shall come to raise the ethers to the plane of light. When this shall come to pass, the Magian land will glory in the light. The soul of Persia calls for light. Islam.
Islam.
If you recognize the message in chapter 8, Council of Seven of the World, you will recognize that it's actually a transfer of age. It's a transition from one age into another age. But you'll also recognize the difficulty, not necessarily justified morally or ethically, that the priesthood have with the exposure of information that they themselves have been keeping from the masses, while they have been enjoying the spoils at the expense of the masses, promoting dogma in the name of religion. But one of the things that you will recognize when you start looking at the political platforms or the things that are occurring in the world, you will know when the sages have met, because you will see radical change, very radical, and then it will accelerate. Now, if you know these things, you are prepared. The issue is that many of the masses have not been prepared, not because they couldn't be, and not because they have not the ability to see these things. They've been distracted by the priesthood into dogma systems to put them off guard, and therefore their sensitivity to that which would already communicate with them in nature is dulled. And the priesthood feeds on them at that time. So this is a reflection of the politics that you see taking place on the planet today, whether locally or internationally, is absolutely the same. And so all of the institutions that they have been grooming for raping the people, suppressing knowledge, reaping heavy benefits for themselves, and then pretending to be separate entities within the state structures, all of the veils that they have that have protected them will come down and are coming down. So recognize what you're looking at when you're seeing what you're seeing. And everything that you see reflected in those statements of Scripture are actually reflected in the politics of the world. I'm going to go into the book of Monad Master to share with you some things one of the things that we want to do in due time, and one of the unfortunate things that you have when you're doing what you call, ad hoc lectures and exposures of information, you have not the advantage of workshops, which we need. And we need some of you to step up to the charge of doing some secondary classes that we will have. We'll deal with more specific and refined demonstration of information and dispensation, whether you're dealing with cosmo knowledge or dealing with jurisdictional actions with the corporate operatives who've been stealing your estate, etc. In the Monad Master, I want to share with you some of the concepts for clearing your mind. This is Monad Master.
Can you explain what a monad is?
Monad is actually like the Atman or the spark of life that people who are really not taught the Gnostic wisdom or true religion just simply loosely refer to as the spirit man or the spirit. That spark of light that is immutable, you can't destroy it, is monad. It's also called Atman. It's like a nuclear light that's actually the minute expression of life that embodies these forms. And it's actually very, very, very small. Now, the monad is usually referred to when it transits into the body or does its work. Then it becomes nomad. The N and the M are reversed. And this is where men, which is the manifest, takes its physical forms and starts going out for experience to bring information back to the monad, which does not die. And that monad is that light, or that is sort of like, imagine in your mind the concept of a small spark in a big pile of wood that you need to fan to keep it brightening up and to begin to ignite, but yet it itself never goes out. You can look at that as the monad. Religion, set up by the ancient ones, is not like almost most things that have been presented, or most philosophical platforms that have been presented to the masses in the name of religion. Most of the masses, when you hear me say, don't get religion, because they really just don't. And it's not their fault. It's not their fault whatsoever. And one of the reasons why I like to read that chapter from the Book of the East is because the priesthood collectively, for want of a more modest phrase, has been actually the problem of the darkness of the world, and the least one charged with it. When you see the stories, like in the Septuaginta, on the Bible, where you see the priesthood fighting Yeshua all the time, and of course the priesthood had a meeting to hide his real history, so when you hear the name Jesus, you're talking about Yahushua. All right? The very fight that he had with the priesthood is the nature of what I'm discussing. The same thing with the nature of the positive principles that Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah brought to finish the cycle of Yeshua, of Jesus. And as you know, they're distant cousins, anyway. and with them running him out of Mecca, and then making a religion out of them running him out of Mecca. You know, you know what I'm talking about? All right. And they ran Jesus out of Galilee. Same principle. All right. Now, there's another side to that that deals with the activation of the pituitary, medulla, pineal glands in the body, and the Christ degree. Another issue is what people need to understand. When the monad chooses to come or to transit on the physical plane, they choose their mother. Most of the time they come back through the bloodline. Usually, that's most of the time, they'll come back through the same bloodline. Though they may choose to come on another point of the geographical location of the planet. And they will come in a female energy or the masculine energy based on where their learning curve is, what they need to bring back to the light. And whereas the masculine energy has more to do with strength of will, the female energy has more to do with what is called the holy breath. So by the nature of the being, this is why most women are more intuitive than her sons, by nature. Doesn't mean that her sons don't have intuitive. We're more willful, you know. And so it gives the appearance of what they call a positive projection, which is reflected in our bodies, in our body structure, and how we approach things. Although the energies are with both all the time anyway. But understand that balance of the feminine and the masculine, etc., is what is known as the Christ degree. That is really taught why religion itself even exists. We're not talking about the corruption for finance that they've developed it into. We're talking about the ancient world, whether you're dealing with Islam, ancient Islam. We're not talking about the creed, the modern creed. We're talking about ancient Islam, Buddhism, Confucianism, etc., Taoism, etc. You'll find they all have the same root, absolutely. You know, and of course, what the priesthood try to do is keep the neophytes away from this information in its root form so that they can rule them. Are we clear? This is why also you'll see when people start exposing some of this information that your first trolls will usually be priesthood, trying to put people back to sleep, talking about his devils and everything, you know, rather than come with a truth argument of facts and give something to displace it. They will condemn it or say the person dispensing the information ain't qualified, or they shouldn't be talking to me because they haven't gotten authority from us, type thing, you know, type thing. Yeah. And the other deal of it is when you begin to give people root information of cosmology, you know, the sacred science of the Gnostic wisdom, which means the knowers, those are those who bear the wisdom. So whether you're dealing with people from a masses perspective, who claim to be, you know, imams or rabbis or shakuns, PhDs, bishops, etc., they're all Gnostics. And of course, they wouldn't want the masses to know that because the masses would look for a common thread. And if they look for the common thread, they begin to find it. And when they begin to find it, they start recognizing that these people are playing with them. And of course, at that point, they begin to lose credibility. Then their clubs begin to fall apart. And what is known as the apostasy takes place. And the apostasy is what you see taking place in these days across the planet. So some of the dynamics that you see taking place in North America, and one of the reasons why it's more, I would say, profound in North America, even though you see some of the dirt, the reflections of their dirt around the world more apparent, you will see the concept of the apostasy taking place in North America stronger than anywhere else on the planet. It will reflect later in other places. Don't get confused the destruction of the war machine that you see in other countries as necessarily that as the first signal. The real signal is that people will lose faith in all of the fiat systems, whether it's the political platform itself, whether it's the finances, the dogmata that they thought was religion, the financial system, the philosophies, everything. That's called the apostasy. That's what you are facing right now. You know, that's what you see. But the advantage of people knowing more about the ancient principles give them more tools to work with as these radical changes take place. Because while these changes begin to take place, it's really not so much a change to the negative, but it's actually a cleanup. But in the process of cleanup, you will get destruction and build at the same time. This is why in common linguistics, they'll refer to it as a great and dreadful day of the Lord. It means there'll be great things and dreadful things at the same time. The key is for you to survive it if you choose to. Meaning that if you choose to survive it because you want more experience, and you want to either contribute to the light or contribute to humanity, and knowing that Rome accelerates their activities to eliminate anyone that bears light. You know, in other words, what occurs is, and what has occurred is that the exposure of information to the general masses, it is no different than taking a bunch of candles to a vampire party and let everybody start lighting them, saying happy birthday to the vampire, and he's trying to tell you don't like the candles. And this is basically what's going on the political realm, and this is what people need to understand. I think a lot of people, because of the way we've been trained, not because they don't have the capacity, are not aware that the priesthood, your politicians are high priests. The fact that the masses don't know that is one of the things that have kept them safe. Are we clear? And other fact, there is no separation of church and state. The state belongs to the church. Right? You know, these are things that are known by all persons in any secret society and persons in politics and all of your heads of all of your so-called religious orders, which is again why they don't like people getting into this information, because it starts exposing them by default, not because you're attacking them necessarily. It's because they've been feeding on the public generally. In other words, they're feeders. They're parasites. And when you educate people and they begin to recognize that beliefs are not a negative, they're just for children, you know, and rabbits, things like that, and for adults who aren't willing to deal with reality. It's like a medicine. And so the priesthood, including those who promote those platforms, refer to the dogma that they give the people as religion opiate for the masses, which means it's drugs, it's mental drug. In other words, they're playing with your head. The deal of it is, I wanted to share with you some of the concepts, because we're not going to go through the whole book, that I think will help free people from some of the dogma. And most of what we actually present to you is to encourage you to start thinking for yourself. Start opening your mind. Stop being closed-minded. Stop looking at religion from the point of view that some of us are special and the others are not, type thing. You know, and don't misunderstand that you have political anomalies and problems that you have, but you must deal with them based on a political platform, but not on a hatred for humanity or separation in humanity in that sense. So I'll get right into this just to do some sharing, and if you see something that sparks your interest, that sparks your mind, that causes you to go from one chamber of the mind to another chamber of the mind, understand that those principles are taught to priesthood, more direct, where they don't have to learn it on their own, although you would develop that on your own. But the problem that with most people, by them being stagnated by the foods that they eat and by the pharmaceutical platform, which is really part of the war machine. They dull people's minds and poison their bodies so that the electrical system does not operate correctly, and that the alchemical energies and chemistry of the body is actually thrown off. And then that allows the dark priesthood to attack them with psychic attacks. This is why belief systems are so important to the priesthood, because they're actually used to inject psychic attacks. So they'll give you slight truths and then give it an admixture of evil, and then seize upon you, but they'll usually hide behind prophets' name, hide behind Buddha, hide behind Jesus, hide behind Prophet Muhammad, and then they'll change the flavor a little bit more based on what the audience is, which is where you get secularism. You know, just like when Prophet Muhammad was on the scene, he said there shall be no secularism in Islam, which means the truth is one, there is no sect. But they got about 78 of them, as an example. You know, where they got about 58,000 different versions of Christianity. And that's true. You know, do some research, they do. And it'll amaze you how much the priesthood has done to contaminate the platforms, but it's done for selfish gain. Are we clear? It's not a matter of, you know, it's misinterpreted. No, fundamental truth is what it is. 2 and 2 is 4. It's not complicated. Does that change when you get on the other side of the planet? Does it change when you get up beneath the water?
Nope.
Well, it doesn't change in truth of religion, because truth of religion is based on cosmology, cosmogony, the workings of nature, the studies of these things, and it being documented and tried and true for millennia, and they become what is known as maxims. All right, this is why, like anyone who really studies Eastern religions, they're more apt to be exposed earlier to what is called the Hermetic Law, the 7 Hermetic Rules. And that is fundamental. Those will be called maxims. All right? So anyway, let's go into the Monad Master. More serious neophytes and students seeking esoteric knowledge of those spiritual truths which are essential to salvation, and salvation is knowledge, it's not you being brought from some dragons getting ready to eat you. All right, so when you do the etymological study, what is referred to as salvation is really where the priesthood is pulling the people out of the darkness of ignorance, not them saving them from some mystical devil. The darkness of ignorance is usually what you call the clinging to the lower nature of man, or to what is known as the lower self. All right? And so they bring you to a level, they help bring you to a level of exposed knowledge so that you can at least meet the heart chakra. This is why you see symbolically, when you see old pictures of Yahushua and they'll have his jalabo open and you see the exposure of his heart, you see the physical heart there. What it symbolizes that when you get at least to that degree, that you can clearly see without having to leave the body, the higher self and the lower self, the physical and the spirit man, and be able to transform on either side at will. Although that is not all, if you understand. So that would be symbolic of an actual demonstration of what common people will refer to as spiritual transformation, or the capacity to go into the physical and into the astral plane and connect directly in the Akashic realm, if you understand. Then you see where, and this is why Yeshua, when you deal with the Gnostic wisdom, and he said, as I am, all men shall be. What I have done, all men can do, and some of you will even do greater works than I have done. He's telling you that there's more degrees. And don't get so caught up in him that you blind yourself to your evolution, your development. He says, I only come to show the way. And so that the people don't get confused, he says, I did not come to do my will, but my Father's will. But you must know that the Father is actually the process of regeneration coming from the mother. This is again why they have a symbol of Yeshua in his mother's arms, because she's the symbol of the God principle and reflected into her son. And this is where you get mother-father principle, what you call mother-son. Mason, mother, son, Elohim, which means mother, son. And so Elohim does not mean a masculine God with a turban on, sitting on a throne in the east, above the clouds, God principle. It really means mother, father. And when you deal with the true Trinity, you deal with what is known as mother, father, son. All right? But essentially, you're dealing with the issue that the Stargate, or the bringer of the physical light for experience on the physical plane, is the womb man, or first man. All right? And so this is why symbolically, when you go into ancient Yucatan, ancient Hikupta, Egypt, etc., you'll see what they call the matriarchy principles of all the ancient deities being feminine. Now, for the priesthood to put people in darkness, this is why they have interjected the masculine principle only of the God, what they call the God principle, and why they don't tell people that the word Elohim means mother, father. They'll tell them that it means God without explaining that, while the priesthood themselves know that it means mother, father. But anyway, let's continue. So more serious neophytes or students seeking esoteric knowledge of those spiritual truths which are essential to salvation, gnosis, will gravitate to those who are likewise seeking light, quote unquote. Holy knowledge of the mind, quote unquote, is therefore indispensable. Man will always find himself where he can resolve and solve his problems best. Always contemplate, study, and look at the present conditions involving self and humanity. Self and humanity, for the learning and lessons are weaved within all circumstance. To those who seek the path of light, we greet I, self-law and master, and Vade Islam means peace, and Vade is of ancient Moabite. Hold on. So, ancient Moabite, Moorish Latin, meaning come into the light. So when in your higher degrees of the secret societies, when you hear them say, Vade Mekum, that means come into the light. And your response would be, Miyam. All right? That means I come. Now, be confident in cultivating and using your divine-given reasoning mind. The reasoning mind is to the conscious, quote unquote, of the being what the immune defensive system is to the physical body. Repeat. Be confident in cultivating and using your divine-given reasoning mind. The reasoning mind is to the consciousness of the being what the immune defensive system is to the physical body. Think, stand still, and know. Heaven. Heaven has been perceived by many and most to be located upon a cloud, somewhere in the stratosphere, a place to go, or a special land where no one else of sin has been, and that it can only be reached by way of divine reward for being good or by paying tithes, which are taxes, to the self-appointed priests who have governed over the people. This is the generalized view encouraged by many religious propagandists who are usually seeking followers and guilt-laden tributes of constantly incoming and secured monetary fees. False and misrepresented deals and sales of salvation have been promised to many, coupled with biased and exclusive entries into heaven, quote unquote. Unqualified promises for a fee are so common that most people never examine the obvious violations against the principles of universal spiritual development and common sense. This is due to the fact that many have already given up their reasoning minds at the behest of the trusted money changers. There are souls, quote unquote, who have not advanced yet well enough to see, quote unquote, with clarity, or to know, quote unquote, with the universality, know the universality of divine truth. Some cannot see through such foresaid false concepts at this present time. We do not begrudge them, chide them for their folly, nor do we condemn them for their vague beliefs and lack of understanding. We know that the world has been deceived on a massive scale, and recognize first our responsibilities as brothers and sisters to ourselves and to them. Our duty is to share information with them in order to change their thinking. Reason will prevail as time passes. Those who know the fundamental truths about civilization and about the unchanging divine principles upon which understanding and overstating are built, that must seek to find a valid format in which to teach the common natural peoples. Truth is the needed remedy to counter many of the opportunists who have institutionalized misgovernment over the people's lives. All will come to right in due time. All must ascend. There are enough advanced humane minds among the people to generate the higher rates of energy necessary for, and remember, energy, keep that in mind, higher rates of energy. For the positive changes needed to stimulate and or to be made. The truth of heaven is that it is a divine state of mind and not a place to go. The higher principle and more just, quote unquote, state of mind will and must change and charge the conditions of life to greater heights and heavenly conditions. As we think, gravitating to the higher planes of our mind, on the collective scale of humanity, so it shall be that the grander, and more just, quote unquote, scheme of things be made manifest. This is why the truth of the heaven and mind must be exposed to the masses. The people themselves are the key to their own salvation by way of their own thoughts and thus their deeds. This is like unto the nature of fruit. Heaven is a word which implies the entire etheric world and a divine state of consciousness while in the physical form, quote unquote, or body. This embodies one's coming to or ascending to the greater and higher quality of the consciousness, quote unquote, and knowledge of one's relationship and connectedness, the most omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent divine total and whole of all. To this said total, many would use the short word, term, or title, God. The wise know that the word God is a generic tide, meaning anything or anyone who is worshipped, idolized, adored, or praised. And so concepts must be qualified. Thus, the high title of God is qualified with a divine attribute such as Almighty God or Allah God, etc. You would almost also say Adonai, etc., Elohim, Brahms, Parabrahms, etc. When one gravitates to a higher conscious level, one knows that the divine supreme absolute is at and in all places, at all times, omnipresent. Thus, one need not physically travel or leave the earth plane to attain heaven or to enter the etheric plane.
Islam.
Nimbus. A nimbus is known to classic iconography, and this is where you see the symbolisms in different religious orders that all have Gnostic origin, as a cloudy luminescence having star-like spikes at the north, south, east, and west locations of its orb. Now, the nimbus, this is where you would see symbolically in ancient symbols or graphics in ancient Yucatan or in Egypt, where you see the high priest or those who have activated their pineal gland. They'll have like a crown, looks like floating over their head, a circle, and you'll see notches on 4 corners. You will not see the bottom notch because it usually lays upon the medulla. So they'll show you, and you'll see a nimbus, that's that glory, and it's usually painted gold. And you'll see a little, whether it's decoration or whether it's an abstract opening. You see an opening here, an opening there, an opening there. If you take the nimbus and put it up, it'll be what you see in the center there. All right? Which is a symbol of the universe. All right, which is the zodiac. And it represents, you know, the 12 houses, the mansion is the embodiment of it. And you hear terms like, in my father's house there are many mansions. Well, it's actually reversed. In my father's mansion there are many houses, but the mansion is actually the universe. All right, and the houses are simply that space within this particular solar system, because it's not limited to the solar system, but the science for this particular solar system would be dealing with it from righties that shows you the charts of the stars of the heavens in the southern and the northern hemisphere of this particular solar system. And if some of you have paid attention, if you'll, I know some of you have, and I know that many of you probably have not. If you notice that when you've been looking up into the ether lately, that the stars seem different.
Islam.
And the reason why they do, because you're actually not in the same position that you was before. I'm not going to go into that right now, but that's very important, because I don't want people to ask a lot of questions in that and get distracted from where we're at. But I'm just telling you, understand that this particular solar system has moved. And you're actually on the trailing spiral of another constellation. Are we clear? Are we clear? So when you see that the stars don't seem to be in the same place, that's because they're not. All right? And there's a whole nother energy that goes with that. But the other reason why I'm talking on this area, because I already know that it will spark some questions that really can't be answered immediately, but at the same time, if you're sincere, they'll be answered for you anyway. You know, you just, it's because some people, even if they haven't been actually willing, are going to be, you know, kind of hit with energies that's going to pick up other thoughts anyway. Because the species has to be moved up, whether they're willing or not. So, and I know a lot of times, and this is, we've discussed this before, a lot of times when we're looking at things, we look at individual charts and forget that when you have transit into the next millennium, that the whole energy cycle changes.
Yes.
And so people are still trying to measure the God ideas that they amassed under the Piscean energy. Not knowing that the Aquarian energy, it's not that it rejects that, but it's a totally different energy.
Yes.
And that there is nothing hidden. And so it makes it difficult for people, because what happens is things that they have built their lives around, if they don't understand that they will be dismantled, they may not be able to handle that. So if you're told already, you're better prepared. And my best suggestion to handle that at all is go back in your mind, be still, remove your ego, and talk to your mother. And ask her why she brought you here. And start paying attention for real, not with your ego. And it might take a couple of exercises to do that. And it doesn't matter whether she's in physical form or not. It just because our concept of how this thing works here is really incorrect. And I'm not trying to present some kind of spooky idea of what it is, but she will tell you. All right? Because that's the Stargate. Because even though many of them have been under the Roman rulership to create darkness on the earth, and may have been to some degree unconscious because everything has been sequentially set off, meaning that one of the reasons why the Romans changed the calendars and changed your major holidays is so that you would start adopting them as certain truths, and you would create anomalies in your own thought processes and come out of harmony with nature and not recognize when nature's talking to you. And that would be operative on what is called the will power. Meaning that because we are creatures, social creatures, and we have free will, therefore we're co-creators on the planet. Whether we admit it or not, or whatever your beliefs are, is irrelevant. We're talking about how things work. And because the masses have been promoted into dogma systems, which is why most of the masses don't take responsibility for what they do. Are we clear? Thinking that they can shed their misdeeds onto Prophet Muhammad, Jesus, and get another sacrificial lamb that they can slay and die for your sins type stuff. And sin actually means moon, if you get the point, really. And so some of these things are simply exposed to you to get you to start thinking again. I'm not trying to give you a religious lesson. Understand that I'm just giving you some of the knowledge that the priesthood have, because the priesthood have been mostly the problem, keeping the people dumb and hiding behind Allah, hiding behind Prophet Muhammad, hiding behind Jesus, hiding behind Buddha. Now, although your Eastern religions are less contaminated, they too have been contaminated by the priesthood for control purposes. You know, and so the deal of it is gotten so bad that really Mother Nature herself is kicking in and starting to upheave, because life continues on this particular plane because the earth is a living being. And after a while, when we, by our free will, because we're signed as lords on the planet, not us praying to some lord on the outer realm. We're the lords of the plane made manifest, and we are responsible. This is why those who know these rules on the earth planet, just like those deists who, even with their contamination, after being taught by some of the brothers from the white Brotherhood, and that's a degree. Understand that's not complexion, so don't get into that. And they called them Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, when they set up the order with help. They're just front. They're not the real founders. That platform was set up as a balancer to stop the hundreds of years wars between the Muslims and the Christians, which was destroying the planet. And that platform was called the United States Republic at North America. It is a political platform. And this is why you see in the preamble when they say nature's law and nature's God, they're talking Zodiac Constitution. Now, and all of them were Masons. They were deists, they were not Christians, they were Masons. And this is why Thomas Jefferson was moved to do what is called the Jefferson Bible, where he did some of the degrees to remove the mysticism about Jesus and the misrepresentation of Jesus in the Bible by the Constantinians under the guise of Christian. That's what you see is the Jefferson Bible. But understand, all of them also had Korans. All of them also had Uaspi. All of them also had the four Vedas. Are we clear? Yeah. And so, the problem that we have, and that has continued, even though that was an effort to raise humanity to a more, what you would call moral and ethical political platform on the earth, peace on earth and goodwill of men. It was still, you still had contaminants amongst them and contaminants behind them. And I tell you this, if you really want to understand the reflections of what has taken place in the upper realm, look at the earth and its political operations as a negative dark side reflection, but specifically at Northwest Amexem under the conquest of the Spanish Inquisition for the last few hundred years. In other words, if you want to see the negative energies reflected. If you look at charts and walk back and also walk forward, center point will be here in the north. And so even though you may see destruction around the earth, understand that most of the destruction comes from the dark priesthood, from the 7 hills, for the Roman goddess Columbia in Washington, D.C. Because that's the military arm. Are we clear? Now, it's important for you to know of your higher self and lower self so that you can navigate these things in the physical realm, because they will be attacking you. So don't even start even deluding yourself that they're not going to, or that they have not been, because they absolutely are. You know, your economic poverty, your discomforts among the masses, the destructions you see in the community, those are psychic attacks. Are we clear? And the psychic attacks have most of their effect with people who really don't know they're being attacked. And another reason why I'm sharing some of this with you is because I know that if you remove most of the mysticism from what people think they have as religion, that actually does not give them protection. It removes the dirt where they themselves already have protection, if you kind of understand. It is not unlike symbolically when you seen the Romans lynching Jesus, and they took his garment, they took his jalabo off, and they tried to rip it up, his robe, to share between themselves, and they couldn't rip it no matter what they did. It was futile. It means they can't enter your aura unless they can trick you into willingly opening up to them. If you understand that principle, you will understand why when Yahshua say, ye of little faith, you know, and in the face of Rome, don't fear Rome. And it doesn't mean that you don't have fear, but understand if you can think of your real being here and why you're really sent here, you understand that although he has power, he only has power because you give it to him. So at all times, know that there is no failure for the human soul. It is perfect even in the bosom of a fool. However, you're given or you choose certain lessons and they are so real on the border of your reality so that you can learn lessons. And this is also why when you choose to come here, the veil is usually pulled. Sometimes some children get through and the veil is shallow, you know, which means they can still see. So sometimes they stay, sometimes they don't. But this is also when you have children that are really extremely intelligent and parents don't understand what they're dealing with, and they start suppressing them with belief systems or giving them drugs. Because the veil is not as pulled, because the body is not necessarily the age of the being. Right. Because the being actually has no age. You know, so this is where you're dealing with the monad master. So if you start understanding these things, the reason I'm telling you this is because you got to start thinking. Let me back up, because I don't want to clutter this thing. One of the liberating statements Noble Ali said, when he said, I come for the young, the yet unborn, the old can go if they want to, he's really meaning those who have adopted the Roman order. And that more children will be coming here with less of the veil pulled. There'll be more and more women that will come into their own, into their self, with comprehension, and will consciously bring champions here. When women get in that energy, Rome cannot win. Forget all the alleged powers that they have. Because you can't beat the Stargate. The deal of it is they have to keep from a strategy position. They want to keep women into the dogma systems. This is why you see churches, mosques, and synagogues, religious organizations, the predominant members are women. They don't know that they're targets. Because if they can keep them in that stagnated mind, drugged, they can rule the world. If these women are unleashed, woe unto he who claims to be a Jew. I'm just telling you the truth. You know, and for the sons, and this is not a competition thing, I'm just telling you what's going on. This is why, you know, we've been projected with the will energy that we have as sons. This is why, like, if you really, you know, if you really lack understanding, and you're with a woman that lacks understanding, don't start fighting with her. You understand? Because you ain't gonna win. You know, she can love you and destroy you, even if she don't know that she can, because of who she is. Because she is the God of good and evil. She got both gates open. Now, without telling the truth about it, this is the reason why the priesthood, rather than tell the real truth, they'll blame the evils on the earth, on Eve, on evolution. That's symbolic of the feminine principle. They kind of got this thing wrong. They're misrepresenting. They're talking about her capacities. Do you understand? So the deal of it is, for experience, you know, she projected us. And of course she gave us our crown and projected us. And we too are her daughters made male in the womb. All eggs are female. You understand? And they dance around us. Like they'll take one and choose one, and then they dance around it, the egg. And they give it what is called royal jelly, royal food. And then it becomes masculine projected energy. And then they mate with chosen ones. And this is why the sons of man, or the sons of womb man, is called son of God. Are we clear? If you get the whole point. And also, when you see the terms in the ancient world, you go do research into ancient Yucatan, into the Grand Canyon, and into Egypt, you'll find the culture is identical, and they don't want the masses to know that. Right. Do you understand? And then you'll see the symbols of the loincloth with the pyramid down. In the Bible, they call it a grape leaf over Adam's groin, which means controlling your lower chakras in order to activate the stomach, intestinal area, and then coming up to the heart chakra. But if you're preoccupied with the lower chakras, it's not that it's negative. It's not that it's negative. You're grounded into the physical, carnal realm and not comprehending, not necessarily that you can't, that your responsibility for using the Stargate for fun, and this would be called gratifying your carnal desires. Whatever the energy is of the gate is no different than the alchemical that you put in, and then you bring these forms through. This is where sicknesses, imbalanced humans come from, and stuff like that. But like a high priest or a true doctor can look at the human, look through their chart and see the salts and the phosphates that are missing and give them the proper foods. That's the origin of medicine. Because you're dealing with salts and phosphates. And then you're dealing with energy compilation of the sons who mate with another woman's daughter. Remember, the reason why woman is called widow is because if a woman mates with her son, she's only mating with another woman's son. Therefore, she has no husband. Are we clear? And thus she's referred to as widow, and we are referred to as a widow's son. All right, so this is, again, where you see the symbol in all ancient temples, and all ancient synagogues, and all ancient, what you call houses of learning. They would always have feminine names. If you're talking about lands and nativity, nations, that's the gathered bodies of mothers' children, they would call it be nations. Nativity, nation, nationality, etc. Inheritances, this comes through the female. You know, if they want to trace any human on the planet,